Hi, welcome back to the Temple Institute, Mechon HaMikdash in sunny Jerusalem. And today we continue our Temple Myth series. And today we will discuss myth number 2. And that is that we cannot build a temple today, but rather we must wait until Mashiach comes, until the Messiah comes, in order for us to build the temple. That is myth number 2. This is actually a myth that many rabbis themselves accept and believe. It's more popular than the last one, which was that the temple will be built by God. But once again, it's lacking any details, and it's unclear what it means. Whether or not when the Messiah arrives, he'll have certain blueprints for us to build the temple, and he'll build it himself, or we'll build it with him. You know, does it mean that we do nothing right now? Just don't build anything right now, including any of the vessels or the garments of the Kohen, of the priest, or the high priest's clothing? We do nothing. So it's very unclear. And the reason it's unclear is because there's no real source for this either. There's no real source for us pushing off the building of the temple until the Messiah arrives. There are those that want to claim that the Rambam, Maimonides, in his Hilchot Melachim, in his Laws of Kings, at the end of his book in Mishnah Torah, claims that only Mashiach can build the temple and not us. But it's a dubious source. But let's see really what the Rambam held when it came to pushing off mitzvot until the arrival of the Messiah. So let's start with what's called Igeret Hashmad. The Rambam, Maimonides, wrote a lot of books, tons of stuff. It's actually incredible that a human being was capable of writing so many books. And one of the things he wrote was called Igrot. Igrot are letters that he wrote to communities who were in trouble in his period, in his days. One of the Igrot, one of the letters, was called Igeret Hashmad. It's a letter of Shmad, and Shmad is religious persecution. And he wrote this letter to give them hope. But one of the things he stated very clearly in this letter, and I will quote to you what he said in the letter. V'chiyuv ha-mitzvot eino talui b'biat ha-Mashiach. The obligation for us to do any mitzvah in the Torah is not dependent on the coming or the arrival of the Messiah. Ela anachnu mechuyavim litasek b'Torah v'mitzvot. We must learn the Torah and we must do the mitzvah. We are obligated to do both. V'nishtadel lashlim asiyatan, and we must do the best we can to complete these mitzvot. V'achar shenaseh ma she'anachnu mechuyavim. Only once we have done what we are obligated, meaning that we've done the Torah and the mitzvahs of Hashem. Im yizkeh Hashem, if Hashem will grant to us, or livnei vanenu, or to our children's children, lirot haMashiach, to see the Messiah, well, harzeh tov yoter, that's wonderful. Vim lo, but if we don't get to see the Messiah, lo hifsadnu klum, we lost nothing. Ele hirvachnu, but rather we've gained basiyatenu ma she'anachnu mechuyavim, by doing the mitzvahs we were obligated to do. The Rambam does not believe in waiting until the Messiah, but rather mitzvahs must be done today, now, here and now. There's no waiting for Messiah for any mitzvot. And by the way, the Rambam doesn't say this only once. He says it in other places in his Igrot as well. And also, in his Hilchot Beit HaBechira, the laws of the temple, nowhere does the Rambam mention any condition that we need the Messiah to build the temple. Now, when you're talking about the halachot, the laws of building the temple, it would behoove the Rambam to actually insert such a condition if he actually believed that such a condition was critical to us building the temple. But he did no such thing. In another book that the Rambam wrote called Sefer HaMitzvot, in Mitzvah Aseh Chaf, which is the mitzvah to do, the mitzvah that we must do, in Mitzvah Aseh Chaf, number 20, nowhere does he actually list any condition of the Messiah being necessary for us to build the temple. So I think this Rambam would certainly disagree with those rabbis that are telling us we must push off the building of the temple until the Messiah arrives. Nowhere does it say that in Chazal, and nowhere does it say that in the Rambam. Now let's go to the Talmudic source here. And I think what really convinced me that we must build a temple today was a source I'm actually going to quote to you. It's a Yerushalmi source. It's from the Talmud Yerushalmi. But we won't stop there, because both in the Talmud Yerushalmi and the Talmud Bavli, it clearly states that we must build a temple today, and we will build a temple before the arrival of the Messiah. So I'm going to start here with this Yerushalmi. And this Yerushalmi, just so you should know, is quoted by many of our prior sages and was accepted by everybody. And here's the Yerushalmi. It appears in Tractate Maser Sheni. It's the 5th parak and the 2nd halacha. And it says, Amar Ravacha said, Zot omeret. This means, and Zot omeret usually in the Gemara means this is the halacha, this is the law. Atid Beit HaMikdash lihibanot. The Beit HaMikdash will be first built, Kodem Lamachut Beit David, before the arrival of Messiah. The Yerushalmi doesn't mince any words here. It's telling you that we will build a temple before Messiah. And how can you think otherwise then? But let's go to the Bavli. The Bavli too, the Babylonian Talmud, also says in Tractate Megillah on the 17th page, and it says there, it's talking about the order of brachot in the Shmona Esrei, in the 18 blessings that we say every day. And there's an order to the blessings. And it explains, B'kemen shenivnet Yerushalayim, that the prayer of V'Yerushalayim Ircha Barachmim Tashuv, when we say that prayer, it is followed by Et Semach David. And he explains that that first prayer, the first bracha, the first blessing, is Kemen shenivnet Yerushalayim, once we've built Jerusalem. Bad David, only then will Mashiach come. And Rashi, the super commentator on the Talmud, says, what does that mean, Shenivnet Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim was built? And he says, Achar yashuvu lebeit HaMikdash. Once they go back to the Beit HaMikdash, and then they will ask for Mashiach, and then Mashiach will come. You see here in the Bavli as well, the order will be, first we build the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, and only then will Mashiach come. So the question one has to ask, how can we then go against our sages? Our sages tell us we're going to build a temple before Mashiach. What gives anyone the right to go against our sages? The pasuk in the Torah says, V'asu li migdash. A simple pasuk states it very clearly, make me a temple. The word Mashiach does not appear in that pasuk anywhere. How can we push off the building of the temple, doing a mitzvah until the Messiah? And there's one other point I want to make here. I think it's very important. Both the case when you say, no, we can't build the temple because God's going to build it, or no, we can't build the temple because Messiah has to build it. On a certain level, what you're doing is you're dictating terms to God. You're telling God, when you bring me Mashiach, I'll do your mitzvah. You don't bring Mashiach, I'm not doing your mitzvah. Okay? You, Hashem, you build the mikdash, then we'll bring your sacrifices, your offerings. You don't build it, we're not going to do anything. You're dictating terms to God. Okay? You're testing God almost. And that's actually asur, that's prohibited. And there's actually a pasuk, a verse in the Torah that says it very clearly, very explicitly. And that's in Ve'etchanan. It's also in Deuteronomy. We're getting a lot of power out of Deuteronomy. So it says in the 6th parak and in the 16th verse, Lo tenasu et Hashem Elokeichem. Don't test God. You're not allowed to test God. You're not allowed to say, hey, God, if you do this for me, then I'll do that. And the Rambam, Nachmanides, the super commentator from the 1200s, he actually says, don't say to God, do for me nisim, do for me miracles, and then I'll keep your mitzvot. Sound familiar? Bring me a temple from heaven, and then I'll do your mitzvot. That's exactly what Nachmanides was talking about. So, as you can see, these excuses, they don't hold up to scrutiny. They really don't. They're not convincing, and they're certainly not halachic. Now, thankfully, the Temple Institute does not hold of these excuses. They don't believe in these excuses. They believe that the sources, like the Talmud Yerushalmi, like the Talmud Bavli, and like the Rambam, they say that we have to build a temple today. And perhaps, we can look at it on a certain level, is that when the Jews were in Europe and they couldn't ever fathom that we would actually come back to Israel, start our own government, have our own army, and then liberate the Temple Mount in 1967, thus enabling us and triggering all these mitzvot of building the temple. I think it was something no one could have ever foreseen. And what actually came as a result of that was the Temple Institute. The Temple Institute came up because of 1967. It arose because of the need and obligation of 1967, which it triggered was to build the temple. And Mechon HaMikdash, the Temple Institute, started a revolution. We won't even call it a rebellion anymore, we'll call it a revolution. It started a revolution to build a temple today. No more excuses. And perhaps it's time for us to reject this myth of waiting for the Messiah, which we don't know when that will happen. But stop waiting for the Messiah and do God's mitzvahs. Let's do his commandments. Let's accept the divine miracle of 67. Let's accept the fact that we're actually in a period of redemption. And let's do Naaseh v'Nishma. Let's fulfill the V'asu li Migdash, the pasuk, the verse of let's make Hashem a temple. Let's fulfill that verse today, and let's build the temple today. Thank you.